This is Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkel.
Welcome back to Inside the Wolf's Den with your host, Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkel. How are you, Shawn?
Doing good.
Looks like it's just you and I today.
That's great.
You sound so enthusiastic today. It's Friday.
It's Friday. I need a break. So
yes.
We're at least taking some time off next couple of days. That's gonna be good.
It's gonna be awesome.
Yes.
Looking forward to it.
If the hurricane doesn't, or what is it, Tropical Storm Sarah or something like that, doesn't mess up our plans.
Oh, I try not to think about it. But today, guys, we're actually going to be discussing overcoming the barriers to letting go. So in other words, I like to say letting go to grow, right? Which is very difficult for us entrepreneurs to do, right?
Is that your new slogan?
Letting go to grow.
Letting go. What was your other one? What's your other?
Your network is your net worth. He loves my little things that I come up with.
You've added another one.
Yes, yeah. letting go to grow, which again is something very difficult for a lot of business owners to do, right?
Absolutely.
I think one of the biggest reasons to that is fear. People fear, of letting go, or maybe they just don't trust enough. Or one of my favorites that I get often from clients of ours that come to us looking for virtual assistants is they think that they can do everything themselves right or better, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're like, I'm just going to do it myself.
Why do you think people need to let go?
Well, the reality is that there's only so much that you can do. Mm-hmm. And so once you allow and you have a team, and once you can delegate that off to a team, like for us, that's happened, and we've seen that through us. I can't remember what year it was, but when you and I decided that, okay, like I think we were at the 500 door mark. We, weren't growing much, but you and I were working our butts off, if you remember, right? And we just made the decision that, you know what? We got to do this. And what is it that we need to do? And we actually kind of signed a contract and said, by this date, we are going to take an entire month off on vacation, right? Mm-hmm. And so we thought, okay, what is it going to take to get to that point? And we thought, okay, we need to delegate off our plates, number one, and we're going to need to get systems and processes in place to be able to do that, right? Everything that we were doing, we needed to get systems in place to be able to delegate off, right? And we had like an 8-month period to do that. And we did that. We took our month off. And I remember telling our staff, like, hey, do not call us. Do not email us. We don't want to hear from you. Unless something is literally blowing up. But at that point, you just call 911, right? But that was probably the best vacation that we had. Did it feel weird?
Yes, absolutely. I went through withdrawals. But
yeah, I remember you going through withdrawals. Like you're like waiting for that text, waiting for that email, waiting for that phone call to happen, and it didn't, right? And I think it took us probably about a week and a half to really, okay, like this is real. Like we are here, like no distractions, nothing. And we even actually purposely went backpacking up in the mountains so that nobody could get a hold of us, and so that we didn't have the opportunity to look at our phones, right, or emails. Yeah. And honestly, it's that one moment that our kids really enjoyed. They still remember that today. And why is that? Because we spent the time with them, right? Mm-hmm.
Mom and dad weren't distracted.
Yeah, mom and dad weren't distracted. That was, they still remember that day and still talk about it today. And as entrepreneurs, most of us get in the business to have more time with our family or spend more time with our family. But the reality is that we are so ingrained to work hard, and work long hours and get burnt out and not have that time, right?
So how can our listeners recognize some of the control issues that they have? So I know you mentioned you said some stories for yourself, but how can they start recognizing if they have control issues where they're in opportunities where they can let go?
Yeah, I think, again, being aware is one thing, right? And I think that a lot of it is mindset, like getting in that right mindset to say, you know what, like whether it's a coach or mentor to help you, or books or podcasts, you have to get in that right mindset to say, okay, yeah, like I know I'm the bottleneck of my business. I know it's not going to be perfect, but I need help, right? Recognizing that you can't do it all yourself.
I think we've talked about this probably on the podcast before. I'm sure most people have heard it. Just if you will take 1 week and categorize your day, like, so meaning like you just have maybe just a pad and paper, and throughout the day for 1 week, you just write down what you did for that whole work week, and you'll start to see trends. You'll start to see like, okay,
100%. The time study is what you're talking about. And I think you should do it for 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks straight. And really from the time that you get up to the time that you go to sleep, what are you doing? Right. And then you can quickly start to, okay, like, do I need to be doing this? Correct. Is this something that I can delegate off my plate quickly? And I remember the time when you did that. Do you remember when you took Fridays off? Just 100% just to think? Yeah,
I need to go back to this. But those are, I just haven't had, the only reason I don't do it today is because I don't have a space to really do that. And so that I feel like.
Go to a coffee shop.
I'm not going to stay at a coffee shop. So we have conversations about each other on the podcast. Anyways, but going back to recognizing and then delegating. So say they start writing down, right, some of the what'd you call it, the time study. So after they did that time study, can give them some ideas of start recognizing. Maybe they can color code it. I don't know how you done it in the past, but start to write down like and maybe build blocks. Okay, I spent this much time in this much time in this, where I don't need to be doing that. Or I think you've mentioned before, start small, right? So start small, finding the little small things that they can start delegating.
Yeah, and I think that you have to start that way, especially if you're letting go of control. You're not going to do it all right away. So you need to start small. And so what I would recommend, create 2 buckets. You create your, maybe your $10 to $15 an hour bucket, and then maybe another bucket that's $200 plus an hour, right? And then off your time study and your list, then you start sectioning them off to the different buckets. And the one that's a $10 to $15 an hour bucket, that's what you want to delegate off first. Those are the things that are not the best use of your time. Yes, they're important and they have to get done, but that doesn't have to be done by you.
Correct. And a lot of times those can be done by a virtual assistant.
Yeah, 100%.
In your business. Why do you feel like listeners, talk about the fear? Like what I think some of them are nervous to do it. I've heard like some crazy things. In the property management world, I get a lot that people are scared to have anybody else talk to their owners or their clients. It's like, why? Like, I don't get it, but I guess I do and I don't. But they're so scared, I think, of losing that client or jeopardizing something that they're scared to delegate because they're scared of, they want to make sure that client's nurtured. And so talk a little bit about that.
I think that naturally, yes, the fear kicks in, like, oh my gosh, like, because maybe it's not going to be done exactly how you want it to be done. It's not going to be said exactly how you want it to be said, right? But I think that, again, it's getting in that right mindset. And I think the 2 things that a lot of business owners fail at is, number one, assessing the skill set, right? So, if you want to delegate off, say, some of the business development assistant stuff, right? Like, what are the skill sets needed for that, right? If they're going to have to talk to people, I mean, that should probably, they should be able to talk to people, right? Or maybe do a DISC assessment to see, okay, what is their skill set level, so you know exactly what they are capable of before handing that task over to them. Right. And the other thing that I think that a lot of business owners fail at is the training aspect of it. They don't have time to train. They say they think that they don't have time to do it. Well, guys, like, I'm sorry, but you have to make the time. Right? So
you're just saying that it's not necessarily about, so they're scared about about delegating and letting go and it not going as well as they could do it. So so they just do it themselves. But what you're saying and encompassing is that a lot of times they need to find the right person to do it, and then they need to train. And put a process in place for that person to do it. And in most cases, what we've seen is if that's done ahead of time, you got the right person and you got the right process, they actually do a better job than probably you and I could.
100%.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, they do.
Yeah.
And then they come to you and like, man, like I couldn't have done it as good as they did. Right.
And I think it's that whole misconception about perfection, right? Like, and in most cases, and I don't, there's certain things I have perfectionism, but there's other things I'm like, it's good enough, right? I don't know. How do you, what's your thoughts on some
I think there's a balance, right? Like, because you can go the other way of, letting go of everything and not like trusting, but not verifying, right? And so I think that there's kind of a balance between like, all right, like, yeah, you don't have to be perfect, and it might not be done your way, but I think that there should be communication with, your VA or whoever it is that you hire. So you set those expectations up front. Set that expectation of how you want things. So that way they know and understand that's what they need to be doing, right?
Yeah.
A clearly defined job description would help that as well. Check-ins, frequent check-ins to say, okay, like, I like this, but maybe we need to work on this, right?
And I think depending on the buckets that you were talking about before, that's the more time, the more training, the more finding the right person matters for those buckets, right? So if it's a
100%
$15 an hour bucket items that you do, there's probably not as much skill set or level that are needed for that person to do that job or training or all that. But if it's a sales closer, $200 an hour person, I don't know, maybe I'm blowing that out of proportion, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yes,
it's a lot more skill set, better skill set, and a lot more training that goes into that as well, right?
Exactly.
So,
yeah. And I think that, training is an ongoing thing, right? It's not something that you do once and then like forget about it, right? I mean, we've seen that with our people in house. Like, I mean, it's constant training. It's constantly reinforcing and saying, and even if you're repeating yourself 7 to 10 times and before they actually get it, right? And that's one thing that I have learned personally, which I know you have also, is that at the beginning, I'm like, I've told you one time, why do I need to tell you to do the same thing over and over and over again? But the reality is you have to repeat yourself. Some people get it. They don't get it till like 7 to 10 times.
What, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, I don't have the time. So say they're small, right? And they're running, right? And if you're a single operator of a business or something like that, you're scrambling half of the time. So, and they don't have the time to train, to delegate those items out, to let it go because they're like, I don't have time to teach somebody how to do this. It's going to take me way too. What do you say to those people?
I think, honestly, if you're saying that, you're never going to have time. You're never going to grow. You got to make the time. I mean, I think, again, it's, if it's an extra hour or so, to block out your time to be able to do that, do it.
No. It's depends on how bad do you want to take it to the next level?
Yeah.
Do you want to keep going down the road you're in, or I'll relate it back to property management. There's a lot of property management companies that are at 50 to 150 doors, right? A ton, right?
And they're all doing it themselves.
And they're all doing it themselves. And year after year after year, they're still 50 to 100 doors. And like, it's like the market, it's the clients, it's the whatever excuse. But half the time it's just because it's them. It's them. And it's because they're not willing to let go, delegate, to push, because all those tasks that they're doing throughout the day, somebody else should be doing, so they can be doing the closing, the sales, and growing. And then that's how you get to the 250 and 350. Yeah, 100%. So
I mean, my advice is if you say that you don't have time, then, sorry, but that's not an excuse. Like, go make the time, figure it out, whether it's time blocking or doing whatever it takes to make it happen.
Yeah, and we'll talk about some prioritization that they can do to maybe get that next level.
Yeah, and
but also it comes down to sometimes it's just you work harder than you are right now, right?
I mean, gosh, we grinded, right? For a long time.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the communication gaps that there are when you're trying to let go and you're trying to delegate. Talk about some of those.
Yeah. So I think, again, it's all about whoever you're delegating to, you have to meet with them regularly. It's just something you have to do. Again, setting time for that. And what I used to do is when I hired my first VA, her and I would meet first thing in the morning. Like, all right, these are our priorities for the day. This is our expectations. Some stucks. Maybe there's some stucks that she had, right, from the day before. And then at the end of the day, again, we would meet 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be long, but just enough to meet so she has questions. That feedback, knowing like what's like that we're here to support her, whoever that is also, right? And so I think you just have to make it a habit of that's what you do.
Yeah. What and encouraging, right? I think let's talk a little bit about, say they fail, right? Or say there's some missteps, right? Along that path of you delegate something and let's say it all goes to crap, right? And so what then? Then they're like, oh, and I think that's why a lot of people also are.
It doesn't work, or I'm just going to do it again myself.
They've been burned, right? Or, and I hate to, yes, people are people. So like, even at our size and stuff like that, we've had pod leaders completely fail and pods go to crap and we have to rebuild and all. And I mean, it just happens, right? No matter what size you are. But just talk a little bit about why. So a good example. That's a good example. We recently had a pod that fell apart, right? A pod for us is somebody that the pod manages 500 doors, has 7 to 8 team members in it. There's a leader. It just crumbled, right? And found all these problems. Our leadership, Joni and I, kind of stepped in. We're all doing it, but we didn't go in the mindset, oh, it didn't work. We're just gonna grind this out and we're gonna do it all ourselves forever. I'm like, no. Number one, I don't want to do that. But two is like, we went in with the mindset, okay, we're going to fix the problems. We're going to adjust the things. We're going to learn from that mistake and what we did wrong in that case. But then we're going to go and delegate and find people that are going to rebuild it. We're going to find better leaders. We're going to find better employees for that pod, and we're going to rebuild it, right? And we're going to delegate. It's not like we're going to. And yes, did we burn some bridges with owners because they said you guys are doing a crappy job and you dropped the ball and communicate? Absolutely. And on the outside world, we might have, in that particular pod, we might have not looked like we knew what we were doing, but it wasn't that we didn't know what we were doing. It was just we had to rebuild, we had to fix some things and rebuild it again, correct? And so but we're the mindset, we're going to rebuild it, we're going to readjust, we're going to learn, recalibrate, and then we're going to attack again, right? And delegate and go through some of the same things that we're talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to go with that, I think that, if you see something, say something, and I think that oftentimes you're like, oh, it's just a small thing, so I'm just going to let it go, right? But then you let something go, maybe you don't like it, and it's not something that, you approve, right? And maybe it goes...
So you're talking about if you delegate it and your team member and you don't see it.
I mean, I think that you need to say something sooner than later, because the longer that you wait, they're like, Joni didn't say anything, so obviously she likes it, right? And so, and that creates issues down the road where if you finally have had it, which it's happened to us, we're like, man, like we should have said something earlier, set that expectation, trained it, coached it along the way, because now that little bitty problem that was a problem is now a huge problem. And now you can't unravel that huge problem because it's too big.
So say you delegated something, you don't like the way that person's communicating, right? Or the way they respond on email, rather than just, it didn't burn it. It's like, just let it go. What just keeps growing and worse. And it's better to right away just to touch it. Hey, there's a better way of saying that, or there's a better, and it's not micromanaging. It's just readjusting, recalibrating, or just calling it. And if that's not how you want your company represented, just call it out.
Right.
Or,
yeah. And don't call it out in front of people.
No,
Obviously, you take them aside and that's why you have frequent coaching calls, right? You do your 30, 60, 90-day reviews, your quarterly check-ins, those sorts of things. So you can have these discussions, but even to that, you should check in with them frequently to provide that feedback.
Yeah, that's great advice. And it's something we're constantly learning on, and only from doing the opposite or making the mistakes that we learn from this is like, rather than wait for that quarterly review that you're going to have and then go over a bunch of items, it's like, no, like,
they don't even remember it at that point.
But they don't remember it.
No.
They don't. And they'll be like, what are you talking about? I've never done that. It's like, no. And
then they want examples, and then you can't remember the examples. Yeah. So, it's better just to, you see something, say something.
That's a great idea. Talk a little bit about so as they start to delegate, right? And things are being put on another person's plate, and then things are taken off your plate. Now you have more time to prioritize. Let's talk a little bit about prioritizing your day now, because you're starting to delegate, and then also how to help that person that you are delegating to maybe prioritize their day with the additional task. And what's important.
I mean, I think for prioritizing, I think each person is different, right? Yeah. Like for me, how I like to do it is I like to choose 3 of the things that I know each day that I have to get done, right? If I don't get anything done at all, at least I get these 3 things done, and I have had a fantastic day, right? And so also teaching your team members to also do that, right? So that way they know, okay, like out of the list of things that Shawn and Joni have given to me, what are the things on this list that are most important that have to get done this day?
I think it also is your top 3. I operate the same way. So my top 3 things for the day, and we use, both of Joni and I use the full focus planner. I forgot the guy's name that started it, but if you just do focus planner, it'll come up. And but that's for us it's categorized that way. So you have your top 3 things for the day, and then you have your other tasks underneath that. And so if I always look at the day as like, if I accomplish these 3 things, that's going to move the needle, right? And I'm always,
I love that. Move the needle.
I'm always wanting to like improve 1% per day, or I want to make our business better 1% per day. So how am I going to move? What's going to move it? It's not, some of these things will knock it out of the park. Some are just small little incremental things. But if I accomplish these 3, I can go to bed and say, hey,
I've had a good day.
I've had a successful day. And then it also has like, your appointments and everything else, and then notes. But I love that I see the top 3 things and then my other tasks.
Right.
So, I don't know.
Yeah. And there's also a framework called the Eisenhower matrix, which basically you classify tasks into 4 categories. So urgent and important, important but not urgent, urgent but not important, and neither. So then you really focus on what matters, right?
So do they recommend starting with the urgent? Was the urgent important?
Urgent and important.
Yeah, you knock out those first.
Exactly, and then you knock out the others. What
I concerned about with some of that is because I think sometimes in property management specifically is that sometimes you think urgent and important,
knowing what is urgent.
You think, yeah. I think that's a whole nother conversation that we can have for another podcast. But I think sometimes, people think that everything's a fire, right? Everything's urgent and important. It's like, I don't know if. And if you're looking from a higher level, I don't think you see that sometimes. Like, so, I don't know.
The other thing you can do is
give me an example, something that maybe somebody would say is urgent and important, but it's in a fire, but it's really not. You have anything? No.
Tenants had no AC for 3 days. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. It's urgent. It is important, especially for them. But is it a fire? Is it have to consume your whole day to take it? So what I'm getting at is like, is that going to wonder if you had? So say you that got put on your plate, right? And you also had on your task or something you were going to do would be maybe calling these 3 owners that had new doors that they were inquiring because they were acquiring another property. what do you feel is, what should be a prioritization?
Right now, I mean, I would say the accounts, right? Yeah. Getting new accounts in. That's new business into my pipeline.
Correct. So maybe I'm throwing it out of proportion, but that would be, hey, I want to make sure that if I go, by the end of the day, even if I'm going to work on this AC issue, right, I'm going to make sure that that gets done sometime. Either I'm going to not take a lunch and I'm going to make sure I call those people. I'm going to, before I leave for the day and go home, I'm going to make sure I make those phone calls.
Right. And again, I love when you said, like, what are the 3 things that is going to move the needle, right? Like, that's going to elevate you. So again, everybody should have goals, right? You should have your annual goals at that point, quarterly goals. And so that's what I focus on. Like, when in my day-to-day, when my 3 things that I'm putting on my list, go back to what my quarterly goals are, my rocks for that quarter, right? What are my rocks? Okay, these are X, Y, and Z I need to get done. All right, well, that's moving the needle because I know that this needs to get done after the quarter, right?
What about weekly? Like, I know you spoke and have talked about like weekly review or team alignment. Talk a little bit about that as it relates to priorities.
Give me an example.
Like, so setting time aside to review your priorities in a world with changing circumstances and new information being thrown at you all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as business owners, we should be blocking out time, to review your week, your prior week. All right, like maybe some wins that you had, maybe some things that you had to work on, right? Because then I think it helps you know, okay, what's been done and like what maybe does your team need help with. So,
I agree 100%. Just a personal thing that I love to do is Sunday nights, I like to review the upcoming week. So I'll look at my appointments, I'll look at things that need to be accomplished that week. And then that usually and then my rocks and my bigger priorities. And so those normally dictate that Sunday evening those things I come up with will probably dictate my 3 things for the next week.
And
each day.
I 100% agree. That's what I do also on Sundays.
And at night, I either before you leave the office or before you go to bed and put your head on the pillow, I like to review my next day and make sure that I got my 3 things. Because here's what happens. The minute you walk in that office and the minute you get started, all of a sudden, if you don't have those 3 things, you don't have everything written down, what's going to happen is somebody's going to come into your office, say, hey, what about this and this and this? You're going to open your email and all of a sudden you got
10 fires that you think you need to put out.
You got things screaming at you, right? And then you got the phone starts ringing. And then it's that owner or the tenant or the client or whatever that needs this and this and this. And all of a sudden it's 5 o'clock and you're like,
I didn't get done. What did I get done today?
What
Absolutely
happened?
nothing.
And I didn't even write down my 3 things, if it's up by then. So I think it's really crucial that you you said, block time. And then something else, when you talked about blocking time, I think you should be blocking out things throughout the week. So that you could do that on a Sunday, you could do that the night before, but you should be blocking out a period of time where you don't allow appointments to be scheduled. You block it out. For us, we use Calendly a lot. And so appointments just come onto our calendar a lot. And so we got to really make sure we block out that time to maybe work on those 3 initiatives, or work on that quarterly rock. Yep. So you got to really time block.
You do. Well. Yeah. And I think with that, I think when you're reviewing your week ahead, that's something that you should be reviewing as well, is your calendar, right? Because I've got owners that will, schedule on my calendar, and so I'm working a week ahead of time to know exactly what is on my calendar for the next week. Okay. And if I've got stuff on that calendar, then I'm time blocking other areas to make sure I don't miss a beat and having time for myself. Because I think you mentioned, having time to think. I think as entrepreneurs, we should all have that time to think. That's when we get all the crazy ideas, and whether they're, good ideas or not, right? Like, as visionaries, we need time to think. And so I recommend that on that Sunday, you look at your calendar ahead and schedule that time for yourself just to think.
Yeah. And it's something that I think that's going to be brought up with this, or that I'm thinking of, is, and yes, it might sound a little crazy, or you might be over the top, or like, man, you guys are really like rigid, or you're really like, you got your underwear off your butt.
And most people probably would think that.
Yeah, so in order to be, in my opinion, to be successful, or to we get asked a lot, how do you run multiple entities and then have kids and sporting events and a marriage and make all that work? It's because you're very, very rigid on your calendar, right? And,
100%.
and your time. So whether your calendar, whether that's online or in a book or a planner, and then, we use our planner for 3 days, and then we have our calendar for our time blocking. Yes, we're very controlled over that, and we're very sensitive to it. And we talk, I think you should be, your time is so important that you need to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Like structured or
intentional.
Yeah. But control it like, with like fears. I don't know what I'm looking for.
No, I get what you're saying.
But like, be very, be very intentional, but protect it. Like,
protect. I love that. Protect your time.
Yeah, because it's valuable, and so because if you don't, somebody else is going to control your time.
Yeah.
And so if you're not controlling it, somebody else will.
Right. 100%. That's why I think we don't miss any one of our kids' sporting events, games, whatever it is, we are there because we are that rigid with our time. Our priority is our children, our family comes first. So, of course, business is there and we have to get stuff done, but we have to make sure that there's no such thing as balance. It's all about being intentional with your time.
Correct. Yeah, that's a good use of it. So, something else I think is cool too, that I wouldn't plan on talking about this, but I really recently there was a great podcast with Jesse Itzler and Ed Milet. Jesse Itzler, if you've ever read any of his content or stuff that he's done, but it's really cool. But he has this the big ass calendar is what he calls it.
Big ass calendar.
It's a big calendar he puts up, but he plans his whole year in advance. So for 25, he's got his whole calendar up there, and it's not so much business related, even though you have some business things in there, like speaking events, do all that, but it's planning that, and then your prioritization. So your prioritization, if it is your kids or your family or your spouse or whatever, you're blocking out those times where, hey, I'm going on vacation this time. I have my kid's sporting event this time. I have a tournament this time. And so everything's blocked out all in a year in advance. And so that's being very intentional, right?
Yeah.
And that's going a year down the road with everything that you're going to do, everything you got planned out. And
I am not there yet, but those are goals.
I mean, we do in a way.
We do, yeah.
I mean, we spend December and we take a couple days to really
the bigger things,
the bigger things, trips, all that, so that because man, you'll get invited to do different events or speaking events. We'll get invited to different functions to promote our businesses, and all of a sudden you're like, man, you got something you could have something every week if you wanted to, but we be intentional with that and block it, and it's like what you can do and what you can't do.
Yeah, and that you're 100% right, because I think that that's you're going to say no to a lot of things.
Correct.
And I was the type of person to be like yes to everything, like I'll do it, like yes I'll do it, right? But it got to the point where okay, like that's not important, like what's priority, what's if it's not going to move the needle for my businesses or my family, do I need to be doing that? I might have to say no. And it's okay to do that. I think a lot of people fear that because they're not going to get a fear of like FOMO, fear of missing out. Like they're not going to get that next opportunity, right? And so, just being mindful.
If you really prioritize and really do the things that are most important, you're not going to miss out on anything else. Yeah. So, but we did a whole podcast on saying no. Scroll through. I don't know what podcast number it is, but we'll put it in the show notes. But there is a podcast we did on saying no,
yes.
and that requires a lot of that. I think that's all we have for today. So if you guys all enjoyed that, please share it with somebody that might get some out of it, or please like it. We're constantly looking for reviews and feedback for the show. If there's anything or content you would love to hear, please reach out to us.
Yes.
At info@insidethewolfsden.com, and we'd be happy to talk about that. And last week we had a really great podcast on sales with a guest, and so if you didn't check that out, please watch that. I think it was very valuable when it comes to sales and sales organizations.
Absolutely. The last thing I will say is that if you are struggling with delegation, I have a 30-day plan that will help you delegate off. So reach out to me. Love to share that with you, and we will include that in the show notes as well, where you can get that.
Yeah, so just reach out to Joni at htownrpm.com, and she'll be happy to forward that to you.
Yes.
So, thank you for listening, and we'll see you all next week.
See you, everyone.
You've been listening to Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkel. Tons of entrepreneurial podcasts are out there, talking. But Joni and Shawn are living it every single day. Their portfolio now includes many franchises and medium-sized businesses. We talk about the trials and motivators of successfully running a business. Join us again soon for another podcast. But until then, reach out on the website at insidethewolfsden.com, on Facebook at Inside the Wolf's Den, on Instagram at Inside the Wolf Den. We'll see you again soon. This is Inside the Wolf's Den. We'll see you next time.